We don't have a federal standard in the US for data privacy. Regulations have caught up with the actual costs and impact of data breach when it comes to violations of personal privacy. And they're taking consumer data that's sitting on my systems and selling it on the dark web, which is of course what's been happening for years and years and years. I like to think of privacy as the other side of the same coin as cyber. Consumers are going to become increasingly educated on their privacy rights. I don't want my health information being sold to the highest bidder.
You're listening to the Ransomware Rewind, where we break down the latest cyber threats, data breaches, and security solutions that matter to you and your business. Stay secure. Stay informed. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Ransomware Rewind podcast. I'm happy to introduce our guest today, David Ritter, CEO and co-founder of Penta Privacy Lock. David's recognized leader in the privacy compliance automation space, leveraging blockchain technology to help organizations meet complex regulations like the CCPA and GDPR, among others. With a background in privacy, policy development, and a track record advising both startups, government agents, and Fortune 500 companies, David brings a unique perspective on the intersection of cybersecurity, privacy, and regulatory technology. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Joe. Great to be here.
Let's dive right in. Recent months have seen some of the largest and most sophisticated ransomware and privacy breaches ever. First Corporation in 2025, 1 million records. Verisource Services, April 2025, 4 million individuals affected. Coinbase vendor breach, nearly 70,000 vendors breached. And there's a credential mega leak with like Apple, Google, all those guys with 184 million credentials from major tech platforms, including Meta, breached. Which of these recent ones stand out for you, David? And what do you have to say about like what's going on in privacy right now?
Yeah, there's a lot to say. I think what we're starting to see is that regulations have caught up with the actual costs and impact of data breach when it comes to violations of personal privacy. And for a long, long time, we had laws that were requiring businesses to invest in more robust cybersecurity solutions. But those were really about preventing hackers from getting in. They weren't really about dealing with what happens when they're already in and they're taking consumer data that's sitting on my systems and selling it on the dark web, which is of course what's been happening for years and years and years. So this is what privacy laws have really been trying to catch up with. And so for that list of breaches that you mentioned, there's a lot of complexity to this because we have sort of a hodgepodge of different regulations and different regulators. So just to give you sort of a 40,000 foot view, the gold standard of privacy regulation comes from the European Union in the form of the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as many of us will be familiar with. And that came out many years ago. As I speak to you today, there's over 100 countries that have passed national level privacy laws. The US is not one of them. We do not have a national data privacy framework. We have frameworks like HIPAA for health data, COPPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. That's for children's data, but there's no comprehensive federal framework. So in the absence of a federal regulation, we have state laws like California's CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act. And these are laws that are California Consumer Privacy Act. These are laws that are starting to put rules on the ground that businesses have to be managing consumer data, not only to prevent attacks, but also protect consumer privacy rights, whether attacks happen or not. So when you mention these breaches, what comes to my mind is that they have two problems they got to worry about. One is they're on the hook for cyber breaches and there's potential claims against them. And I think you're the expert in cyber claims, so we can dig into that later. But they also have to worry about paying fines for privacy violations. You know, for example, in many states now and larger companies that report to the FTC, if you suffer a breach, you're supposed to report the breach in 30 days. This has become more stringent in a lot of cases. And it's not enough to just report to the regulator, hey, we were breached. You also have to report to consumers who are impacted. And if you don't report to consumers in a timely fashion, then you're on the hook. And one good example of that in recent years, T-Mobile, who had a huge breach a couple of years ago, they're under the California Consumer Privacy Law, CCPA. They're going through a case right now, a class action lawsuit, because they failed to report the breach to individual consumers who were impacted in a timely fashion. That's a long way of saying that all those breaches show up on my radar. And what I take away from it is that they have to think about not just the cyber liability that comes with the breach, but the privacy liability.
I failed to introduce my co-host, the beautiful Mike Dowdy. Mike, do you want to follow up on that? Is anything coming up for you? And when you hear about CCPA and GDPR and what's going on there, do you have any questions related to that?
Right. But I'm going to give more context. I've known Dave for a real long time. I knew Dave when I was at the very Net. And what happened was Dave started talking to me about blockchain. There's something that works with, Dave is absolutely brilliant. He's out of Australia. And when I first started seeing what they were doing with blockchain for compliance, I thought it was really interesting. And the reason I thought it was really interesting is I was responsible for doing audits at SOC 1, 2, and so forth. And they give you a whole bunch of controls. I just want to give people some context on why this is so important to me. There's all the controls, and a lot of times humans will go, good enough. You have biometric scanner, it's just a check in the box. And what happens in reality is it's not true. With the blockchain, it's a ledger you can't alter, obviously. And that's what really got me into what Dave was doing with Privacy Lock. So that's the question. I see where in development, they're starting to take CCPA more seriously now. And I'm seeing more people mention CCPA. And this is why you'll see it mentioned in the scope of development. I would wish it had more ease with the current administration. I don't know if they're going to enforce laws like that. Privacy seems to be a thing of the past, and it's just my opinion. But yeah, it's definitely something that has to be addressed, especially on the application where we're building the application. People need to know that their data is.
Absolutely. You have a product called Penta Privacy Lock. Am I saying that right? Or is it just Privacy Lock?
It's just Privacy Lock.
Okay, sorry. You have a program called Privacy Lock. How would that have prevented some of these breaches from happening?
That's a good question. The short answer is it wouldn't have prevented the breaches, but it might have mitigated the fallout and the costs that the businesses incur as a result of those breaches. So let me unpack that a little bit. I like to think of privacy as the other side of the same coin as cyber. You got cyber on one side of the coin, privacy on the other side. Cyber to me is really about preventing people from getting in to systems that they shouldn't have access to. It's about preventing hacks, about preventing breaches, and it's putting up the kind of security to your data systems that are capable of tracking and preventing those breaches. But once the breach occurs, then that cyber system has failed, right? It failed to prevent the attack, it's in. So now we have to think about the other side of the coin, which is privacy. And that's where a nefarious actor has gotten into the system and they have gained access to consumer information. It could be sensitive information like financial information, which is the world that I live in, where we work with banks and financial companies to safeguard consumer financial data. It could be sensitive health information if it's a company that collects or processes health-related data. So this can be potentially very harming to consumers. And so that's the privacy side of the coin. Some people use the language of data protection. Data protection in compliance terms often refers to the sort of combination of cyber and privacy. So from a strategic perspective, you can lump those under the umbrella of data protection. So now back to your question. Privacy Lock would not have prevented the breaches. We're not a cyber tool that prevents hackers from getting in, but it would have mitigated the costs and liabilities for the businesses thereafter, because what we're starting to see is more and more data breaches being priced not only in cyber, but also in privacy. That's where these laws like CCPA or GDPR can have some teeth, where consumers become empowered to bring actions like a lawsuit or civil action against a business that failed to safeguard their privacy, whether there's a breach or not. So in the event of a breach, the kind of basic responsibilities that a business have are: one, to report the breach in a reasonable amount of time, and two, to inform consumers about what data might have been captured as part of the breach, and then three, to give consumers the right to make requests about their data. Those requests include the right to request deletion, the right to request that you give me access to my data, whether it was breached or not. And these, we call these data subject access requests, or DSARs for short. And by failing to respond to data breaches with breach notifications to impacted consumers, and giving them the right to request access and information about what information was collected, what might have been breached, that would be potentially a violation of privacy law. And now, coming back to your original question, the business is now on the hook, not only for whatever ransomware attack or fallout might have occurred on the cyber side of the coin, but now they might have to price this breach in terms of privacy fines and violations. And that can be very expensive.
Yeah. So for the privacy breaches, which ones are like the most expensive for people to pay for? I know, like in Illinois, there's BIPA for biometric data, and it's like $1,000 per record. But I think the CCPA has a lot of teeth too. Like what cost per record should people be worried about that will make them raise an eyebrow and look into a tool like Privacy Lock?
This is a good question, and I wish I had a simple answer for you. Unfortunately, as I was saying before, we don't have a federal standard in the US for data privacy like they do in Europe with GDPR, or Canada, our neighbor to the north, who has their national law, which is PIPEDA. So
we love Canadians.
We do love Canadians. So, we sort of have a hodgepodge of different laws across the US, and they all have different structures for regulatory fines. California is one of the more robust in terms of enforcement, and it's been on books the longest. If GDPR is the international gold standard, so far the US gold standard is California's regulation, which is CCPA. In CCPA, there's two levels of potential fines under CCPA. One is a statutory fine, which comes from the Attorney General of California bringing an action against a business that's failing to comply with the rules and regulations of CCPA. This is $2,500 to $7,500 per incident per violation, right? That's a lot. And, what does that mean per incident per violation? It could be, I have 1 million records, I failed to comply with the material aspect of CCPA. So potentially I'm on the hook for 1 million times 2,500, 7,500, that range. It could be, it could be reviewed differently by the court. And there's still questions about how courts actually look at that. Now, the other level is where individual consumers in California can bring what's called a private right of action, which is a civil action against a business for failing to protect my privacy rights. And that's $100 to $700 per incident per violation. So, again, how do you calculate that? Not really sure. What we've seen so far in regulatory actions is that there's been a lot of settlements rather than actually coming out with a rubric that says you had this many records and this is what you have to pay. But so every state's different. California is $2,500 to $7,500 per record per violation. That's the statutory fines. In Colorado, my home state, it's up to $20,000 per violation. I think there's a cap on that. So different states are a little bit different. In GDPR in Europe, it's up to 4% of annual turnover is the potential risk there, which is a huge, huge potential cost to businesses that are failing to comply. Now, of course, you have to look at how regulators are actually enforcing this and how the settlements are actually coming out when these regulatory actions take place. And there's a lot of sort of settlement going on behind closed doors. So, but there's been a large number of fines paid in GDPR. We've seen a lot of fines in CCPA. You mentioned BIT, which is probably one of the most litigious laws so far in the US. It is possibly the gold standard of biometric privacy laws, and that's the Illinois law. There's a similar law that was passed last year in Washington called I Have My Data. Again, it's a health data law. It's not a consumer data law. It's very similar, but it narrows what's protected to health data versus all consumer information, which is what's under CCPA. So again, it's a head scratcher. There's a lot of different regulations out there. They're all priced differently. They're all enforced differently. Some states have private rights of action, like California, Washington. I think Oregon does as well. Other states do not, where you can only have an action come to a regulator. So we live in this sort of strange times from privacy landscape in the US. But think about this just for a second. Let's say in the US, there are over 100 countries that have passed comprehensive national level data privacy laws, sort of like Europe's GDPR. And here's a statistic from Gartner. At the end of 2023, so about a year and a half ago, for the first time, more than half of the world's population was living in a jurisdiction with a comprehensive data privacy law. I think the number is 63% was their estimation. So that to me is a huge paradigm shift for the way that businesses work with data. It's going to transform the way going forward that businesses in some of the world's largest markets like Europe, India, China, Brazil, major markets that have national level privacy laws, the way that businesses are allowed to collect, process, share, and monetize data in those jurisdictions.
Yeah, I could go a couple different ways on follow-up questions for that, but I was piqued by the healthcare part because we've always had HIPAA, but HIPAA's never had teeth. And I think some of these privacy regulations are adding to that. In the healthcare space, what are people doing now and what mistakes are they making as far as privacy goes?
HIPAA is an interesting one. It's been around for a while, and it certainly has changed the way that healthcare companies collect and manage and monitor their usage of data. But as you rightly point out, there's a lot of loopholes in HIPAA, and we've seen a lot of bad behavior when it comes to health data. And so one thing so by the way, Privacy Lock, this year we launched our HIPAA auditing platform. So we're in the business, in addition to consumer privacy, also HIPAA related privacy. And one thing we do is we help businesses to audit their data systems to make sure they're in compliance with HIPAA standards. But sometimes you're in a state like Washington State, I mentioned a moment ago, has a law called My Health, My Data, which is it's a consumer data health. Let me see this again. It's a consumer health data privacy law versus HIPAA, which is the national framework for health data. Here's the complexity that businesses face in a state like Washington or possibly Illinois. If I collect consumer data, I have to comply. If I can collect consumer health data, I have to comply with HIPAA. But let's say that I take that consumer health data that I've collected from a patient intake form or from a visit where when a patient comes to the hospital, for example. What if I also put that data into a CRM system or a medical billing database for some third-party application that I'm billing through? Or if I want to promote something to them, hey, now we're offering a new vaccine at a discounted price, and I'm sending them a promotion email. Well, this is where it becomes really tricky because regulators might look at that and say, hey, this was data that was used in a use case that was not strictly a HIPAA use case. It wasn't related to a healthcare service. It was related to something else, a billing workflow or a promotion. Marketing and promotion is where you can get into a lot of trouble. And so they might look at that use case and say, hey, this is a usage of data that actually is governed by the My Health, My Data law, the Consumer Health Data Privacy Law, not by HIPAA. And then you might be required to follow different regulations. So this is, again, the head scratcher. We live in a world where different data workflows might be governed by different privacy frameworks. And that's very challenging to figure out. So what do I recommend to businesses? I think we're moving toward this privacy paradigm where businesses should really be thinking about building privacy controls and protections into their data processes from day one, before you collect that data from the consumer. And the research is very, very clear. Consumers absolutely want this. Consumer advocacy groups absolutely want this. Even if the regulations are kind of in an uncertain base or they're different state to state, we are clearly moving towards a global standard where consumer privacy needs to be protected. And so my best advice to businesses who might listen to this is, don't wait for regulators to come after you. Your consumers want you to protect their privacy. So you should be building these privacy protections into your data processes today.
Do you see that a lot, where the marketing department is not talking to legal or talking to the cyber department, and they're doing these promotions, they're tracking people through Facebook or Google without any type of consumer disclosure or TOS type disclosure?
Yeah, we see this all the time. Not every company, but sometimes it's inadvertent, and you can get caught with your pants down, so to speak. If, for example, you gave an example there a moment ago where I might be capturing information using Google and then using that to provide a targeted ad. Targeted ads are a big no-no in states with privacy laws. So this is one of the low-hanging fruit for regulators to go after, because it's easy enough for them to go on your website and figure out if you're placing targeted ads or if you're collecting browsing information for pixels. Pixels are also an example where not every business might be aware that third parties are collecting information from pixels. So this was explained to me by one of my tech partners. He was saying, it depends on the level of sophistication of the business, but if I grab an image on the internet and I put that image on my website, which I've done before on our websites, so we're guilty. Sometimes you don't realize that third parties have placed pixels on those images. When you're grabbing that image on the internet, anybody could have already embedded a pixel. And if you haven't scanned those images to determine whether or not there's a pixel on there, that third party might be collecting information when your consumers come to your website to browse. Or your marketing department might be collecting that information and not informing the legal department or the compliance department. And all of these are instances where you could potentially get into trouble. And actually, this might be something to throw back to you, Joe, because I know you're experienced, you're an expert in the insurance industry, but we're hearing that one of the fastest areas of growing cyber claims is in what's called wrongful collection, meaning wrongful data collection. And a lot of this has to do with cookie collection that's not disclosed, targeted advertising, and data collected through pixels. I'm curious what you think about that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the Net Diligence Cyber Insurance Convention, and they were talking a lot about privacy and how ransomware has become like less of an issue, and privacy and data breach on the back end of these claims has become like the most expensive part of the claim. People are getting better with backups. They're getting better at clicking on links and stuff and reloading from backups. And they've gotten better at like negotiating with hackers on the ransomware part. But the data breach part, once they have extorted or taken that information off person's computers, the fallout of that has become much bigger because of CCPA, GDPR, and it's becoming much harder to insure. There are some policies that will insure all that. Some have sublimits because they're trying to limit their risk, and some will exclude it altogether. So you have to really take a close look at your policy and make sure that those privacy regulations, especially wrongful collection, usually it's called wrongful collection on your policy, are included. And I know at least for TCPA, there's usually a supplement for that, if any, coverage for TCPA. Can you explain TCPA to our audience?
Well, I was just going to add something really quickly there, which is that a lot of the breaches that we've seen in the banking sector in the last few years, this is an important one for businesses to realize. A lot of the breaches are occurring at party vendors and not necessarily through the native systems. And this can still result in fines and a lot of liability or claim against you, because if you're choosing your vendor and you're choosing to share your consumer data with that vendor, then and that vendor gets breached, and then you have some kind of a privacy violation of a like that, well, you might be on the hook for that privacy violation because it was your vendor who was supposed to comply with your privacy policy. So that, and in the banking world, we've seen a lot of good work in recent years to sort of shore up harden, cybersecurity and make sure that cybersecurity is more robust. But we're seeing breaches happen more and more to third-party vendors. I was wondering if you've seen that on the insurance side and seen that be part of the wrongful collection story.
Sure. Yeah. And then TCPA, just for our listeners, is the Telephone Consumer Privacy Act. And if you are calling people that might be on the do not call list, or a lot of marketing now is through text, that's covered under that as well. So there's so many like marketing programs that are texting people. So all that's covered under TCPA. And yeah, companies are hiring other companies to market for them. That's not their strong suit, marketing. So they'll get a telemarketer. They'll get a company that maybe part of like their what are those programs called? Like when a client, you sign up with the retailers, you put your like number in there so that you can get a free donut or something.
Just like the grocery store.
Yeah, so they have that information and they use it to market to people. And like you said, we don't know if those companies are following all those rules. And because you collected the information, the buck stops with you because you're the person that collected it, even if it's a third party and it's in the cloud and it's not, anything you have control over.
Yeah. And so, the TCPA, I've heard a lot of people complain that they feel that the TCPA hasn't been well enforced, because the whole idea of the TCPA was to get rid of all the crazy robocalls and stuff like that, right? But of course, we just went through a presidential election year. I'm sure we all received robocalls, and I know I got like million text messages that I did not consent to receive. So I think we have to conclude that there are some holes in the ability of regulators to enforce TCPA. And this is just speculation on my part, but I do wonder if some of this is going to be plugged by state privacy laws. Because if where the TCPA or where the privacy violation is possibly occurring is if the business is sharing or selling consumer phone numbers or other contact information to those third-party companies that are data aggregator or marketing companies that are building those huge databases of consumer phone numbers and then selling them to political parties, to marketers, to Fortune 500 companies, whatever. I mean, that data, once it's there, it's being sold left, right, and center. And if you're the business that is selling that data to those data aggregators, then the regulators could come after you through the privacy regulations instead of TCPA.
Wow. Just to bring it home a little bit, what can us, I know we're all business owners and are professionals, but like as consumers, how can we protect our own privacy and hold these companies' feet to the fire?
I think that consumers are going to become increasingly educated on their privacy rights let's say in the next 5 to 10 years. We know that that's the case because when we look at what's happening in Europe, which has the GDPR framework, it's been around the longest, it's been enforced the longest by regulators. We see it in California, in terms of the US state regulation, where consumers are learning about their rights and lawyers are learning how they can leverage consumer rights to bring class action lawsuits against businesses that fail to protect and uphold consumer privacy. I think what we take away from this on the consumer side, every consumer wants their data privacy to be protected, right? I don't want my health information being sold to the highest bidder. I don't want my credit card information being sold to whoever's going to pay for it. I don't want my sensitive information leaked on the internet. And of course, this is what's happening and nobody wants it. So we know there presents consumer demand for privacy protection. I think as consumers become more educated, some of them are going to learn to flex their muscles by making more privacy requests to businesses that collect their data. That request might be, I want you to delete my data, or I want you to tell me what data you've collected on me so I can make an informed decision about whether I want to do it with you or not. I think this is going to be another paradigm shift in terms of how businesses interact with their customers when it comes to data. And then I think part of the story is that it's not just going to be consumer driven. It's also going to be driven by third-party businesses that are already cropping up that are providing privacy services to consumers. There's applications on the market right now where you can go and say, hey, I want you to be my privacy concierge and opt me out of all this data sharing, request that all these companies delete my data. And you can automate these requests through these applications. Discover, by the way, it was really interesting. Discover has had a program that they Discover card where you can sign up with them and they'll go to like some of the biggest data aggregators and they will make a privacy request on your behalf to delete their data. So businesses are stepping into this. Yeah. So businesses are stepping into the vacuum and they're helping consumers to exercise privacy rights. But I think as of today, a lot of this might be new information to consumers. They may not know what their consumer rights are. They may not know if they live in a state that's passed a law or not. So I think, again, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're really going to see consumers become more educated. We're going to see more businesses and applications help consumers to drive privacy requests to businesses. We're going to see more lawyers figure out how they can bridge consumer privacy demands against businesses to profit from lawsuits. And that's already happening in California, by the way. It's already happening in Illinois with BIPA. So certainly we have to expect that in a country like the US, which is a very litigious country, we're going to see a lot of lawyers jump into the fray. And ultimately, I hope where it lands us is a place where businesses take consumer privacy seriously across their data lifecycle. Whatever they're doing with consumer data, from collection to processing activities, to sharing, to storage, et cetera, and vendor relations, that they're going to start building these privacy controls and protections into that data lifecycle. I hope that's where this leads us.
Great. And I know Privacy Lock is going to help a lot of companies do that. How can people find you, Dave?
Thank you. Yeah, please visit us at www.myprivacylock.io. And we help businesses to stand up privacy programs from scratch. We do HIPAA audits. We do data privacy audits. We do all kinds of things. So please visit us, and we invite you to let us be your partner in privacy.
Awesome. And if after you talk to Dave and get your privacy lock in check, come talk to me about cyber insurance. I'm sure we could get you discounts knowing that you've actually taken hold of your privacy and improved it. And make sure if you are getting cyber insurance, you have coverage for wrongful collection. If you need some more support on that, please give me a call or email us. Just Joe at C3 Insurance is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And with that, thank you again for coming. Make sure you like, subscribe. And what, Mike? What do you want to say?
I can put my 2 cents in. when you're
All right.
working with MSPs, vet your vendors. I can't tell you how many vendors are really loose with customer data. I've seen like Excel spreadsheets with people's personal data. So I'm going to throw that in there too. Is vet your vendors, especially on the MSP space.
What about the data center space? I know you've worked in data centers a lot.
Absolutely. And the data center space as well. You've got to vet them. Don't say, oh, well, you got this audit, everything's fine. See if you see someone in the area that can actually visit the data center,
That's great advice.
because they have access to your data. They can pull out a hard drive anytime they want.
I don't have anything else. This was awesome. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show, Dave. And, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it, leave us a comment. We all reread all our comments, all 2 or 3 of them, and that are from me and Mike.
But hey, we got 421 loyal people. So
Yeah, that's just on YouTube.
I'll try to leave the
That
third
doesn't-
comment.
Okay. Thanks,
let's hear
Dave. Appreciate it. Awesome. I see you guys.
cool. See you guys.